Following a string of strong seasons in 2022 and 2023, Max Verstappen was the difference for Red Bull last season. The Dutchman spent the majority of the year in inferior machinery than McLaren, but this did not prevent him from winning a fourth world title. But now, the Austrian team is on the verge of losing their most precious asset. Of course, even before Verstappen's latest victory, Red Bull needed no reminders of his significance to the team. However, the troubles of his colleagues, most notably Liam Lawson, have exposed Red Bull's reliance on the 27-year-old. As a result, the Austrian team is under increasing pressure to address the RB21's early shortcomings, not only to save the season, but also to secure Max Verstappen's services for the long future. And this is where things are heating up, as according to reports, Verstappen might be on his way out of Red Bull, with McLaren already showing signs of a possibly dominant MCL 39. Teams will soon be faced with a critical decision: focus on the 2026 regulations or pursue the 2025 title. For most midfield teams, deciding to focus on 2026 will be pretty simple. Even frontrunners like Mercedes have shown a desire to focus on the upcoming regulations. However, the same cannot be true with Red Bull. Following 18 months of relatively slow development, the Milton Keynes team cannot afford to abandon the RB21. If they allow a narrative of their demise to get more established this year, the story may become much more bleak in 2026. To make it worse, Max Verstappen has regularly complained about his most recent F1 cars. If Christian Horner's team fails to build a car capable of competing for wins, Verstappen will be urged to consider other options. Red Bull is currently predicted to have a slow start in 2026 due to their new power units. As a result, it is critical that they have a successful campaign this season. Helmut Marko has been frank about Verstappen's contractual situation. Of course, every top driver has an exit clause if performance is not good, he said. Helmut Marko has already issued similar cautions regarding this issue. Max always wants a car that can win, he explained. There are always performance clauses. And if we can't offer him that, a winning car, it will be difficult to keep him. And not only the car is a reason for Verstappen to stay, but recent driver changes have also upset the Dutchman. To make it even worse, the choice to replace Liam Lawson with Yuki Tsunoda appears to be primarily a short-term one. And Tsunoda's performance in the RB21 over the next few weeks may decide Red Bull's title hopes. They are already well behind McLaren in the standings and cannot afford to lose any further ground. Should Tsunoda swiftly adjust to the RB21, Red Bull may have a fighting chance to limit the damage to McLaren and Mercedes, at least until their first upgrade package arrives. Beyond that, there is another viewpoint to consider. If the Japanese driver faces similar difficulties as Lawson, it will only highlight Red Bull's reliance on Max Verstappen. Given Verstappen's prior statements on the VCARB02, he felt Lawson would perform better in the second team. It would be a disaster if Tsunoda was also unable to enter the top 10. If Red Bull intends to change the growing cynicism surrounding their operations, and thus retain Verstappen's services, changes must be made quickly. But even by Red Bull standards, the start to 2025 has been extremely hectic. Liam Lawson left the Milton Keynes team after only 2 weeks, and Yuki Tsunoda replaced him ahead of this weekend's Japanese Grand Prix. The team's driver dilemma is unsurprisingly dominating headlines, with Red Bull repeating previous blunders by significantly overestimating Lawson's ability to adapt to the RB21. Leaving aside the obvious criticism that Tsunoda will face this weekend in his home Grand Prix, Christian Horner's squad must also overcome a development slump. The RB21 isn't operating as expected, and the road to recovery could be difficult. Last year's championship was defined by McLaren's Miami upgrade package, which propelled them into title contention. Despite the fact that these gains arrived quite early in the season, Red Bull did not make any significant changes to counteract the papaya team's resurgence. Max Verstappen's sheer willpower, along with McLaren's operational blunders, helped him win his 4th title. Despite the fact that the 2025 season has only just begun, Red Bull is already on the defense. The RB21 is several steps behind McLaren, and, maybe, the Mercedes W16. Last season, Christian Horner indicated that his team's development strategy may approach a limit by the end of 2024. He acknowledged that Red Bull was struggling to find solutions, as has become painfully obvious in recent weeks. According to Helmut Marko, Adrian Newey's absence is significant. "It's true that the RB21 is very difficult to drive," he said. "The racing ball is easier to handle and very fast on a qualifying lap. But in the race, it lags significantly behind the Red Bull. Of course, we miss a man like that. A Newey is a Newey. But we're a team of almost 1,000 people. The crew behind him was built up gradually." A few weeks before formally starting work at Aston Martin, Adrian Newey spoke about his final months at Red Bull. The 66-year-old admitted that he had reservations about the team's prospects during their successful 2023 season. Newey believes he was concerned about some of the characteristics developing on track, but other top engineers at Milton Keynes dismissed his worries. Almost a year after Newey's departure, Red Bull is certainly in their lowest point in several years. Taking the drivers' or constructors' title in 2025 appears doubtful, unless there is a big upgrade package in the following weeks. Max Verstappen's criticisms from last year have not been resolved, and Yuki Tsunoda must swiftly adjust to the more notorious second Red Bull with no pre-season. In addition to these short-term worries, Red Bull is projected to face challenges when the 2026 regulation is implemented. The difficulty of developing their own engines for the first time cannot be overestimated. In all likelihood, they will fall behind more established manufacturers like as Mercedes and Honda. Given their already bleak prospects for 2025, the Austrian team cannot take consolation in their long-term trajectory, given the unavoidable changeover period in which key players like as Adrian Newey and Rob Marshall join rivals. But there seems to be one silver lining for Red Bull this week, as apparently everything that normally holds the RB21 back might help it this weekend. So, is there hope on the horizon? The Dutch driver definitely appears to believe so, and we could see improvements as early as the Japanese Grand Prix. The Japanese Grand Prix suits Max Verstappen and Red Bull Racing, which has had a difficult start to 2025. Yes, Max Verstappen is second in the championship standings, but Liam Lawson has fared so poorly in the first two races that Red Bull has already decided to swap drivers. Verstappen stated after China that the performance difference between the RB21 and its McLaren adversaries is bigger than expected. Though he admitted that the car is better than last year, the RB21 is still not where he wants it to be. That will undoubtedly set off a season-long battle to improve the machinery, at least until the team decides to focus only on the forthcoming 2026 car. But don't worry, Red Bull fans, Max Verstappen remains hopeful. Verstappen spoke to Spanish television after the Chinese Grand Prix, offering a detailed assessment of his race performance, as well as the additional improvements the RB21 would require. "The first stint went as we had planned," he said. "Just run our own pace and not try to hang on to others to avoid degrading the tyres. They pulled away in that first stint, and then on the hard tyre I tried to keep the pace from the beginning, but I was lacking. For some reason, in the second half of the stint, the tyres stabilised, and I could push more and increase the pace. It's something we'll have to analyse. Of course it's positive, because in the end, the pace was more promising, but we're still not where we want to be." He recognised that there are many lessons to consider ahead of the Japanese Grand Prix, with the goal of increasing the overall performance of the car based on the data Red Bull collected in Japan. "Hopefully, in Japan, we can extract more from the car," Verstappen remarked. "Suzuka suits me, but it also has to suit the car. We'll have to analyse everything from this weekend, and hopefully we can find a bit more performance." What do you think? Will this be Verstappen's last year at Red Bull? And if so, where will he move to? Aston Martin or Mercedes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and don't forget to put any predictions for the Japanese GP down there as well.